We're live and welcome to the October 28th P&Z meeting. This meeting is held live and as on Zoom as well. You're welcome to dial in at 719-359-4580 to attend. Oh God, I'm loud. We'll go ahead and have the roll call.
Councillor Corcoran.
Present.
Commissioner Guyman. Present. Commissioner Cowan.
Present.
Commissioner White.
Present.
Commissioner Connerton. Commissioner Houghton.
Present.
Commissioner Sipperly. Here. We have a quorum.
Do we have any comments from citizens appearing for items that are not on the agenda tonight? Anyone online? Seeing none, we'll just check in to see that there are no conflicts of interest for any of the items listed tonight. Seeing none, we'll move on to planning file 2525 code amendment regarding restaurant drive-through using use in the resort RE district.
Okay, Emery Ellingson, Community Development. I'll be presenting and sharing my screen. Second. Where's the screen share on this? Sorry, based on sign in or not? There's two windows. This one.
Yeah, you should be able to minimize this. Yeah. That?
So we got those. And here's workplace.
Oh.
We don't need that.
You can just leave that in the background though. Why is that?
See, it's down.
Yeah.
So this is too simple. So.
Yes, it's not up there.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay. Okay, sorry for the delay. First one in a while. All right, so today is a code text amendment, so it's a very specific item regarding one use in one zoning district. And Planning and Zoning Commission is a recommending body for a code amendment. So this is going to go on to City Council for a final decision. And so the potential code amendment is to make a change to the resort zoning district to allow a drive-through restaurant as a special use. And so staff has made a recommendation for you to all recommend approval for City Council for that final decision. And so just to get started, the use table as it stands now, zoning code lists many uses, including restaurant and then restaurant with a drive-through. And then every single use that's outlined in the use table can either be a permitted by right use, which is just an allowed by right with no additional approvals, a special use, which always comes to Planning and Zoning Commission for a special use permit, or it's a prohibited use. And you can see that in the zoning table. Any of the P's, that's where zoning districts is permitted by right. The S is special use, and when it's blank, that's a prohibited use. So right now, as it stands, you can see the contrast where a restaurant with a drive-through is allowed in some districts, always has a special use permit, but is currently prohibited in the resort zoning district. And then likewise, you can see how it contrasts with restaurant, where that's a permitted by right use rather than special use in most zoning districts. And so that's what we're looking at tonight, is just that little S right there is adding that to the use table. And then essentially the way code defines the difference between a restaurant and a restaurant with a drive-through is the drive-through either has a walk-up counter or a drive-through lane. And so that's the key difference. So just for starters, resort zoning district, it's a high intensity commercial zoning district. There's not that many parcels in town that are zoned this, but the intent is, like I said, commercial development, high intensity, and they are kind of isolated from other properties. They're in very particular places in town, which I'll go through here in a second. So two of the parcels are here at the 27th roundabout. So number one, that's the Benedict project that was built there. And then number two is senior living. So there's definitely a variety of uses that are already allowed in the resort zoning district. And we've seen them be developed that way across town. And then these are the rest of them. So 3, 4, and 5, that's Iron Mountain Hot Springs. And so all those properties are zoned resort. Like I said, lots of different uses are allowed. And then the remainder are over in, so this area in Glenwood Meadows, 2 of the properties have been developed as hotels. And then there's 2 vacant properties, which last year Planning and Zoning Commission did see a major site plan for a hotel on what is now parcel 8. This parcel actually has been subdivided. And so these are vacant parcels. And so the hotel developer has indicated an interest in developing a possible restaurant on this site. But again, nothing's been approved. And so again, there's only 9 total properties citywide that are resort zoning at this time. So the criteria, there's 5 criteria for a code text amendment, and I'll go through just each of these as they're outlined in the staff report. So again, your role tonight is to consider how well this proposed code text amendment lines up with their criteria, and then also to clarify too, this application is coming from staff. So occasionally staff will identify places in code that we think need revision, updating, revising, and then we bring it to Planning and Zoning Commission and then ultimately City Council. And so that's, this application is coming from staff. So one is just that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan and other city policies. And so it definitely meets some of the action item goals in the comprehensive plan to really retain the city's role as a regional hub and then just attract diverse businesses. And then also it lines up with Glenwood Springs economic development strategies. A big thing with that is providing choice through variety. So when you think of Glenwood Meadows and all the different options that you can have there for shopping, eating, retail, having a drive-through use be allowed as a special use would allow more opportunity for kind of that choice through variety. 2 is just that it doesn't conflict with other provisions of the code. And so in the resort zoning district, other drive-through uses are already allowed as special uses. So that includes banks and personal services. And so this would just be another similar one. So that's being consistent. The other commercial focused zoning districts already allowed as a special use permit. So that's your commercial zoning district, M1 mixed use. So that keeps it consistent with that. And then also too is the special use permit, it still allows review on a case-by-case basis. So if any of these properties were to, Iron Mountain Hot Springs had a concept for a drive-through that would require special use, it would still come to here for review for looking at some of those things that can be, drive-through can have some really location-specific effects, lighting, noise, traffic, those sorts of things. And so that would come with the review of the special use permit. 3 is necessary to address a demonstrated community need. So the comprehensive plan identifies a community need for a strong, diverse economic base. And so just allowing opportunity for future development in these areas. And then it could also have the potential to attract new restaurants in the community. Because criteria number 4 is necessary to respond to substantial changes in conditions and or policy. And so definitely, especially since COVID, you've seen a lot of restaurants that in the past might have not had a drive-through use, like think of like a Chili's or even an Applebee's, Chipotle, where it used to be more of a sit-down model. They've really diversified and added that drive-through use. And so you have seen a change in the marketplace where, it's not just fast food chains, McDonald's, Wendy's that are wanting that drive-through. And then again, it's just additional opportunity without losing the ability to review. And then 5, just consistent with general purpose and intent of the code. So we're a commercial focused zoning district. It's compatible with other commercial uses, and then the district allows other drive-through uses. So again, so it's pretty straightforward, specific, recommended change to the zoning code.
Thank you, Emery. Do commissioners have any questions for him? Commissioner Guyman.
My only question is why, when we wrote the code, were there no drive-through restaurants allowed in these resort use areas?
So when the code was rewritten in 2018, so I went back and looked at the previous code. And in that previous code, it was also left out in the resort zoning district. So I think barring any substantial change or reason to make that change at the time, it was just carried forward. So, and again, I also think too, is if you think back to that previous code, you're going back to even further where drive-throughs really were, really fast food only. You didn't see a lot of other restaurants doing it. And so I think there was an idea of limiting that to certain parts of town that are commercial zoning district. Because the resort zoning district, yes, it is a commercial zoning district, but it does have that more resort focus. So that'd probably be why, I guess.
I have a question. The big question asker. So you mentioned special use permit. Are you recommending a permitted use by right or a special use?
No, so it would be to add it. I'll bring up the use table just for everyone to be for reference as a special use, similar to where it is other places in town.
It currently is. I'm sorry.
Correct. It's currently not by right use anywhere in town.
It
a drive-through
currently is.
restaurant.
Okay.
Yeah, so bring up so here we can see M1, M3, CO,
Currently is. special
always a
use.
special
Okay.
use. For those reasons, it can have a lot of impact on a neighborhood or a location that you'd want to look at.
So just to clarify, not allowed now, looking to make it a special use. not a use
Okay,
by right.
okay,
Sorry.
okay. Thank you for clarifying. You knew what I was asking. Okay, so we would still be able to, have oversight over what's happening. If it was a high traffic area, there would still be building standards that we would be able to review. I think that was my question. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would just add that, excuse me, that's why we feel comfortable with adding it as a special review use, because it gives us really the opportunity to review all of the perceived negative impacts of, traditional fast food drive-through type of developments. We received obviously previous inquiries about revising the zoning of a property from RE to M1 to allow for that use. But then you open up that particular property to all of the uses that are allowed within the M1 district, as opposed to being able to limit the impacts via the review of a special use permit.
And that kind of encourages spot zoning, which we don't really like as well, correct?
Yes, and we didn't really get into the details related to that proposed M1 zoning as much as we just kind of saw this as a potential way to address that current request, but then also limit the opportunity for other types of development on these resort zone parcels or M1 zone parcels.
Perfect. Okay, if there are no other questions, then back to the commission for a motion or
Do you want to check if there's any public?
no? Is there anyone that would like to make public comment? Anyone online? Doesn't look like it. Back to the commission for a motion or discussion. Commissioner Connerton.
I would make a motion. to recommend approval of the planning file CDA 000109-2025 to City Council, incorporating the staff's findings because the application meets the approval criteria for code amendment, which you laid out quite well. The findings are 1 through 5 and suggested conditions. I don't have any.
And do we have a second? Commissioner Cowan seconds. We'll call the vote.
You did second this. You did. It's just a little.
Oh, I just saw him light up. I'm like, he did. I am paying attention to this.
It's a lively.
The beast is distracted.
Oh, okay.
Are we going for the vote?
Yep.
The motion passes unanimously.
I think that's.
Nice one.
Was that the progress?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, because he would be the new guy.
Okay, moving along to planning file 5025. Oh, wait, is that the one we just did? No, 5025 code amendment. And this is a consideration of a code amendment application regarding fire and emergency services and police impact fees.
Good evening, Commissioners. Trent Hyatt with Community Development. Very excited to be back with you all and back with the city. I'm here to present or at least introduce a planning file for an additional code amendment regarding fire and emergency services impact and police impact fees. Again, the request tonight is consideration of a code amendment. That's going to be to update our existing fire and emergency services fees, as well as adopt a new police impact fee. Your job is to provide a recommendation on this code amendment application to City Council, who makes the final decision. Staff does recommend approval of the current request. Just to give you a little bit of background on impact fees, I think it's pretty common knowledge that development within the city increases our population by employment and the new citizens that come to live here via residential development. That also generates a need for proportional increase in the services that are provided by city departments, including fire and police. And impact fees are means to address the funding shortfalls that are contributed to those departments by the additional increase in population. In the state of Colorado, we've been using impact fees for development since approximately the 1920s. If you can imagine that those fees were at that time associated with water development in the state. Today, Senate Bill 15 and applicable sections of the Colorado Revised Statutes govern how we manage impact fees, and they state that they shall be a one-time fee for the cost of facilities needed to maintain the service levels of our various departments. So these fees can only be one time. And they're intended to maintain facilities for the police and fire departments. They shall be roughly approximate, that's per the Supreme Court, to the burden that land use places on those various departments. That's what we call the essential nexus in planning, kind of all the things all the fees and the costs associated with development that we apply via building permits, via fire fees, via parkland, school dedications. They are not to be used, however, for operations. So you can't use that to fund the personnel within those departments. On July 17th of this year, Chief Darris and our consulting team with BBC Consulting and Research presented these fees to City Council. However, that requires a code amendment to Title 70 for us to be able to apply those development fees to the proposals and development applications that come through our office. Currently, just to go over a few that we have parkland fees, we have school land fees, we have fire and emergency services impact fees, as well as a public art fee. And now just to give you an explanation of those fees and kind of how we determine what the cost of future facilities for the city and the impacts of existing development, we've got Chief Darris and Michael Verdon from BBC Consulting and Research to help explain those a little bit. And Michael, if you want to just request to share your screen.
Sure, that's
Should
great.
switch
Am
over.
am I coming through okay?
Yep. And we can hear
Great.
you.
All right, I believe, let's see here. Here we go.
Before Dr. Verdon comes on, I'd want to greet the commissioners and say good evening. I'm Chief Joseph Darris, Chief of Public Safety here. I want to defer to Dr. Verdon here for his presentation regarding the methodology about how we've arrived at some of the statistical information that we'll present to you. So I'll be here if you have any follow-up questions for me about operations in Glenwood Springs. Otherwise, I would defer to our professional, Dr. Verdon and his team over at BBC Consulting.
Great. Thank you so much, Chief. Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for having me present. This is a bit of an abbreviated presentation, so if you have questions after we go through the slides, I'm hoping we'll have good conversation, and I have some supporting materials as well. So I'm going to dive right in. So we began working with the city earlier this year to set impact fees for the fire district and revise the impact fees or update them for the police department. Throughout the process, we worked closely with the city staff to collect the information that we need and validate that so that the calculations and recommendations that were put forward in our report were consistent with everything that was going on in the city and the fire department's service area. The result of this was that we calculated impact fees for both residential and non-residential development types. This was already covered, so I'm going to skip over some of this and just jump into the fees that we're recommending. So for the police, the methodology is really one of, again, determining how new development creates impacts that need to be mitigated with the fees. So there's sort of two pieces to that. One is identifying that nexus. So for police, the nexus is that new development creates more people in the community, and those people create a service burden on the police department. And so the task is to really understand how different types of development influence populations that demand those services, and then to put a value on that. So for this approach, we use what's called the capital buy-in. So it's a method where we work with the chief to estimate the value of the capital facilities owned by the police department and what those would cost to replace today. So as new people come in and they have to buy squad cars or build out part of a station, we want to understand what are those costs in today's dollars. And so we'd compile a huge list of all of the assets and try to value them at their replacement cost. So what that does is it basically allows us to say, based on the service populations the police department serves, there's a certain amount of money they have invested per person. So you might get a number like if the city currently provides $1,000 worth of police facilities today and a new development comes and there's 3 people per unit living in that development, the impact fee would be $3,000 to allow the department to maintain their service standard. The important part is that we want to look at the replacement values because that's what it costs today to buy those assets. It's not the value, the appreciated value for those assets based on what the city paid years ago. And so without going too much into the weeds on the mathematics of it, the result of our process to come up with the fees is a schedule that's shown here in this table. So what we're recommending is that the single family impact fee for police is $1,400 per unit. For multifamily, it would be $1,000. And then non-residential is on a per square foot basis. And these are determined by the sort of intensity of use or employment associated with these different non-residential development types. So for retail, it's about $1. Office is about the same. Institutional, 72 cents per square foot. Warehouse and storage would be about 10 cents, and industrial is about 46 cents. We did look at the census projections over the census data over the past several years to sort of understand growth trends in the area and make some projections about the revenue that the fees could generate. So we believe the fees as proposed would generate something in the arena of $70,000 per year. And again, that's for the capital facilities required to accommodate that growth as it occurs. If there's no growth, of course, there's no revenue. And if there's more growth, there's more revenue. So moving on to the fire department. The impact here, the nexus is really the construction of a building and the complexity of its use. So for single family and multifamily homes, the nexus is just the size itself of the structure. For non-residential, it's looking at the employment rates associated with those different types of non-residential uses as an intensity factor that helps us sort of allocate the burden of paying for the facilities the fire department needs. Again, we use the capital buy-in approach, so looking at the replacement value of all the district's assets and portioning those fairly to the different types of land uses, and then again using that replacement value to say what does it cost to buy all of this today as that development occurs. So the fee schedule here is a graduated schedule for single family residences based on the size of the dwelling. So starts at about $3,200 per dwelling for homes less than 2,000 square feet and appreciates from there. So for a dwelling of 4,000 square feet or more, the fee would be about $12,400. It's about $2,800 for multifamily. And then the non-residential is about $1 per square foot for warehouse at the bottom here, and then $2 and change for the non-residential uses. Based on the growth trends that we analyzed over the past 10 years in the community, we think that these fees could generate something around $400,000 per year for the fire district. So again, that's to allow them to maintain that service standard as development occurs. If there's no development, of course, there's no revenue from the fees. And if there's more development, then the fees appreciate accordingly. But the intent of these is just to help the department maintain what they're doing. So again, this is, I think, quite an important thing for both the district and the police department in terms of maintaining those service standards. So that's sort of what I wanted to get through. If we want to go more into detail on the nuts and bolts, please let me know. I have some slides to support that. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And questions?
I have a couple of questions, so I apologize in advance. First, is there text for the amendment? I didn't see it in the packet. I didn't see like a red line or anything like that.
There's currently not. Basically, we would replace the tables that were provided in the presentation and in the staff report with the existing tables that are in our code.
So will the police fee be nested underneath the fire and emergency services fee, or is it a separate?
Yeah, underneath that one. We thought that was a better place than
Yeah,
underneath
exactly.
The last one in the list, which is public art. It seemed more appropriate next to fire emergency services.
So sorry, I totally blanked there. You said it was a new fee underneath the fire and emergency
Correct.
services. It's police are
I think it's
emergency service.
subsection 3 or 4.
It's actually subsection 5. I was just pulling it up, emergency services impact fee. So we're just, depending on you guys' recommendation, we're working on the draft right now in my office to, make the language as clear as possible. But the core of it is, are we going to implement them, and at what level?
Mhm. And that, so keeping them under the fire and emergency services keeps us from having to go to other parts of the code, correct? Because, for example, the affordable housing waiver references specifically fire and emergency services. So would that police fee be eligible for a waiver in the affordable housing?
Yeah, that's a
section?
good question, and I think the answer is yes. That's part of nesting it in fire and emergency. It's still underneath. In my mind, it's still an emergency services impact fee, whether it's police or fire.
Okay, but it just calls out those specific
Right,
parkland. So it seems like
It's like right.
if we added a sixth one or whatever, it would have to be added to that
have
section.
keep
as well.
tweaking things. No, I appreciate that.
Michael, I guess I have a question for you on the methodology. In 2024, 65% of fire calls were for EMS services, and it seems to be heavily based on fire risk. Is that a fair assessment that the impact fee is based on fire risk and the demand for services seems to be EMS?
Yeah, so the fees for the fire department are based, and I can go to the table where we can look at how the calculation is made. Let's see here. Okay, this is police. Here we go. So for fire, it's really based on two parts. For residential units, it's based on the distribution of the actual square footage of different types of residential development. So basically what we figure out is that the fire department has about $24,500,000 of capital that is used. If you took everything that fire district owns and you tried to break that apart to say how much of it serves residential and non-residential, we think about 24 million of that belongs to residential development. And then we take that number and basically divide it by these percentages that are associated with different sizes of dwelling units for single family homes and multifamily. And that tells us then what the sort of cost burden is for structures of different sizes. We divide that by the number of units, and that essentially comes out with the fee. So that's where the residential fees come from. The non-residential are based on the employees per square foot. So the more intense the use is, the higher the share of that particular non-residential uses share of the total cost burden would be. And then based on the existing patterns of development, we can calculate what we think they ought to be paying to sort of replicate that service standard. So that's kind of the math behind it.
And I guess my concern with that is that we're a tourism-based economy. We have 1.3 million tourists visit annually, and we're talking about 3 employees instead of 100 tourists, right? I mean, how do we rectify or not? How does that make sense? For example, I believe lodging falls under retail and commercial, but in my mind, it's analogous to multifamily housing from an impact perspective.
Yeah, I mean, the logic, I guess, behind the fire fees is that, whether a structure is, particularly for non or residential structure, whether it's occupied or not, there's sort of a burden of protection. And that's what drives the demand to buy a new truck, let's say, or build out a station to lower response times. And so for fire districts, we generally use sort of this footprint approach rather than looking at a population-based approach. For the police, it's different. That is sort of broken out into these different populations of residents, non-residents, and visitors, because, there it's the folks, the people that are driving that demand. And so we look at that a little bit differently.
But I guess if EMS is our most common call and 2% of our calls are for a fire, isn't population what causes an EMS call and not a structure or the size of a structure?
Yeah, but again, we're looking at sort of not the operational side, but the facility side of it, right? So, do they need to buy an engine? Do they need to build out more of the facilities? Do they need to put a new station in? So, that's where we take the perspective that it's really sort of a footprint rather than a population focus for fire protection rather than police.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Sipperly.
My question is regarding the payment of these fees. Will they be applied to every piece of new construction, whether it be commercial or residential? Will it apply to remodels? Will it apply to creation of new ADUs? Who has to pay the fees?
It would be new construction, so not remodels of existing square footages. But ADUs, yes, would be a part of that. However, ADUs are also permitted for a reduction in the fees, if those are end up being deemed restricted units. So there are some pathways to reduce those fees. And then the other housing, ones that Jay mentioned, so.
And is the payment due at the time of a certificate of occupancy or at permit application issuance?
Usually it's half and half.
Okay.
So it's half at building permit and half prior to a certificate of occupancy.
But there is some flexibility involved in fee waivers for things like affordable housing and workforce housing. Great, thank you.
Usually those priority type of developments, based on policies set by city council.
Commissioner Connerton.
Thank you. You answered my one question. Thanks, Commissioner Sipperly. So I guess, Dr. Verdone, So can you just kind of expound a little bit on these fees, how they improve efficiency, and the provision such as infrastructure? Also, I mean, I understand like a new fire truck is going to cost like 3 million. It's not just like a, a $60,000 thing, maybe 100,000 for a police car. So, with the expense. And then also, do you have any information? So that's the first question. The second question is, did you look at all the other surrounding communities and how they are also looking at impact fees?
Sure. Yeah. So thanks for your questions. So for your first question, in terms of how it improves efficiency, for many fire districts and police services, they're funded off property tax revenue. And so a lot of budgets are constrained. If you don't have impact fees, a new development occurs and they need to expand their facilities to maintain service standards, they have very limited ways to do this. So the Colorado legislature created impact fees in part and allowed the special districts like the fire protection district to charge these fees in order to maintain those service standards because they really don't have any other mechanisms to build out those facilities in the absence of them. If you don't have fees, what happens is that as that development occurs, the burden of maintaining that service standard falls on everybody. So instead of development paying its own way, the community is actually subsidizing development to a degree. So, I think from a fairness and efficiency perspective, they're a way of making sure that the folks creating the demand for those facilities are paying their fair share for them. With respect to your second question and what other districts are charging, we do comparisons and we do a lot of these studies. So these are all kind of fresh in our mind. I couldn't tell you right now off the top of my head what the jurisdictions around you are charging for fees, although I can say that these are basically similar to what you would find from other sized communities in a similar context. So, fire districts with more rural service area tend to have slightly elevated fees compared to fire districts that operate in more urban settings. And that's really just due to a lack of economy of scale. So there's a certain level of capital facility required to provide fire protection services, but in more rural areas, you just have fewer people to spread those costs over. And so that equates essentially to a higher cost per unit. The police look fairly comparable to Glenwood Springs to Grand Junction. They just went through an impact fee study themselves, and public safety was part of that. And so the police fees that we are proposing don't look that dissimilar. The one caveat I'd give you is that comparison can be difficult with fees because you're not always comparing apples to apples. The service standards across communities do vary, and the fees reflect the existing service standards. And so one community that's maybe low service might have very low fees because they just don't have the facilities necessary to maintain a higher service standard compared to another. And so there's always just that caveat to note when you're looking across communities.
Commissioner Connerton?
Oh, sorry. Thank you. No, I was going to bring up Grand Junction because I know that they just did a big study on their impact fees. And I think I think they were a little higher actually than this, but thank you. I appreciate the answer.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Cowan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Michael. Just looking at, I think from what we are hearing is a type of development. But looking at the impact fee requirements in your slide deck, you say fees must be imposed on all forms of development. Are we distinguishing type and form through this?
I'm not sure I quite understand the question.
I mean, am I understanding that correctly?
I think the disconnect is that you're talking about planning commission, so they think of form as a specific literally built environment of development. Not, I think when you referenced it, you just meant that all development would be subject to the fee, regardless of type. Did I get that correct?
And thank you, Carl. Specifically, I'm looking at just the impact fee requirements on the slide deck. I think it's the fourth one, you just have that delineated specifically, speaking of all forms. Just trying to see if that distinction does need to be there between type and form, or if it's all meaning the same thing as Carl suggested.
Yes, it's exactly what Carl suggested. We could just change the word form with types.
Okay.
That does bring up your question brings up a good thought for me in regards to Carolyn's question. So, generally like a remodel or a change of use, Carolyn, would generate the need to pay impact fees because you're basing that equivalent rate or that use on usually the basis for all these is a single family home, and then you go from there. So what we would do for existing fees, for instance, we would evaluate what the current use of the building is and then make a determination if that change in use is above or below that. But, if you were to remodel a home per se, you would not be paying a fee for that. Or if you were to remodel an existing retail use into a new retail use, that fee would not change or be charged.
So following up, thank you. So with that kind of blanket, all forms, all types of development have to be included in this fee structure, but we're carving out specifically new development.
I think that the way I'd approach that is that new development is all development. So if you're redeveloping that single family residence into a duplex, you'd be paying an additional, impact fees for water, sewer, these fees if they get adopted, parkland, all of that would be on that additional impact of that new development.
Right.
New development.
So all forms of development.
It's really, we're talking about new development that if it already exists, we're not going back and charging it, assessing every single family residence in town an impact fee for fire and police services.
Got it. Yeah. So just again, kind of
And I
stating
think
that.
that all of the existing development is actually included in the analysis, and
Right.
it is assuming what's our annual increase and
Yeah.
the need to increase the services to meet.
Thank you. Yeah, just decoupling my brain here and just focusing on that. All development inclusive inside of that new development is part of that.
Right.
That fee. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, the bills don't go out next week.
I have a few questions. So, Michael, this nexus is commonly used throughout the nation. You guys do this a lot. And back to Commissioner Houghton's concerns, this is what you use in all your studies.
That's correct.
Okay. Other questions I had, how has the police department been funded previously? If we didn't have an impact fee?
I was going to say the police department has traditionally been funded almost entirely out of the general fund.
Okay.
There would be some, for things like police cars and stuff like that. I think it's probably fleet. Fleet funding would provide for that right now, which is a separate fund that the city has, although that fleet doesn't have its own revenue source. It's just an internal accounting within the general fund. For facilities, it would come out of either the A&I fund or capital projects, which do have dedicated funding streams, but those funding streams, police facilities weren't really one of the identified things necessarily in A&I when that tax was passed. So you're really talking about capital, which addresses all of the needs across the city for all kinds of capital construction, not
Right.
just fire and emergency services.
So this is just an augment to that. This is not actually fully funding the police.
Right. And there again, in Colorado, you can't use impact fees to fund operations.
Correct.
So we're really talking about things that have a fairly long useful life, cars, those kinds of things, and then new facilities as they would become necessary along with those long-term capital operational things that you would need that would qualify.
Okay. Another question I had, how do these proposed fees compare to what people are paying right now? I mean, I know for the police fund, they're not paying anything for the impact fee. But what about the fire department fee?
Yes, that is a good question. Chief, I might let you field that one. I don't know that I have a slide on your current
I
fees.
could certainly pull up the existing fees. I thought in the study actually that there was a table that analyzed
See
existing
it.
fees versus proposed, but I could be mistaken. But we can get it pulled up for you if you'd like.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. And the impact study.
So it's actually not code. Because the reason it's not is because we set, the code authorizes the council to annually set fees via resolution. And off the top of my head, I honestly can't remember what the fire impact fee is set at.
I just want to know, like,
Yeah.
you know,
how
is it a
how
huge
compares.
increase or
That's what
how?
I thought that they had, in the pulse study, I thought it was included in there as a comparison
See it.
to current, but I apologize for that because
Emery, I think it's on our website too, right? Sorry.
Watkins.
Got it. Watkins? Appropriate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
we could do that too.
Yeah. We need to make it a lot bigger.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yes.
That's a short.
So currently, and again, currently for fire and emergency services impact fees for one equivalent rate. Again, that's kind of that's our basis for understanding what the use is of any classification of land use. It's $1,600.
Okay.
And Michael, yep, it looks like you got the new one up there.
So the lowest tier would be that 3267. So it's doubling.
Yep.
Okay, and then the last question I have for right now is when was the last time that we adjusted these?
I don't think we've adjusted them in recent. Yeah, I was gonna say, I can't think of adjusting them post-COVID. We may have adjusted them in the late.
Yeah, not since
Yeah,
I've
so
been
it's been
here.
5 or 6 years at a minimum since they've been adjusted. And I don't know that the fire impact fee has actually ever been relooked at and adjusted since it was
Mhm.
adopted in the early 2000s.
So an adjustment is
Yeah, it's
definitely
not
necessary.
completely
Yeah.
unexpected that there would be a change in cost, especially when we look at, costs, especially on the capital front, on the construction front, cars, all of those things. I mean, the escalation in cost has been significant. We've all felt it individually as well as, from a
Just based off
standpoint
of
of.
inflation. Yep. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Guyman.
What is the impact fee on some of these apartments that we're building? Because I don't see that in the list. It's just single family, multifamily. What would it be under?
It would fall under
Triggered
multifamily.
So one multifamily is it per unit constructed would be $2,700?
That's correct.
Okay. And the other question is, I saw that you have in your calculations, you've projected how many units are going to be constructed. Is it just reassessed annually? Because what if it's greater than and now we're overpaying into the fund?
That's a good question. So the projections of revenue are really just a way to help you gauge how much money these may generate if previous growth trends continue. If that number, let's say there's no growth and that number is 0, that's okay too, because it means there was no growth that necessitated a fee to offset the impacts through the purchase of capital facilities. So if there's more growth, that means there's more impact and those revenues would need to be higher to offset it. So no matter what level of growth you experience, the fees are really designed to just generate the revenue needed by these different services, excuse me, to make sure that they have the money they need to build the facilities out. So they're kind of agnostic, I suppose, to how much growth occurs. They're just designed to make sure as that growth does occur at whatever level, there's sufficient revenue for the fire district and for the police department to go purchase the things they need to maintain those service standards.
Great, thanks.
Commissioner Sipperly.
Thanks. Would it be valid to assume that if the police impact fees are approved, then that would prevent the police from drawing on the general fund, thereby making more general funds accessible for other city projects?
You want to do it? I think that's, it's not necessarily a straight line like that. I would say most of the capital that we're talking about is really coming out of other funds, although fleet is funded out of the general fund, along with some money coming in from other funds to help support it. So it's going to have a material impact that is positive, but it's not going to fully offset because it can't be used for operational,
Right.
which is probably the largest. I mean, personnel across the board is the largest impact to the general fund for the city, whether it's police or fire or ComDev or whatever.
And any amount that is generated, will they sort of be able to keep the fees in an account for year after year so that it maybe 5 years down the road, there's an addition to the police station or a new fire station? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Is it appropriate to add a couple comments?
Absolutely.
So I don't know that if you've ever had, and I apologize, I don't know the historical context for y'all, but an idea of kind of how things work. So right now in the police department, we're fielding about 25,000 calls for service per year. And right now we have about 8 officer vacancies that we're fielding. And since I've been here in 2020, we've always maintained at least 2 vacancies. So when you look at the number of personnel that we have, and those 25 officers, 27 officers are distributed among detectives, a school resource officer. So they're not actually officers that are handling calls for service each day. And to your point about emergency medical services and things like that and tourism, that's an important piece because the fire department, to your point, you're accurate in that the vast majority of calls for fire are EMS calls, but the tourists contribute to a significant amount of those calls, whether it be at a hotel, shopping at Target or a ski resort, whatever it might be, that our fire department serves that rural fire protection districts out in the county. But to the extent that the police department and the fire, we're extraordinarily limited in personnel. Sometimes we staff or we field 6 or 7 firefighters for the entire city for an entire shift. So recently we had a fire up near Walmart. And so that took our entire fire department to go and deal with that fire and call additional resources from surrounding communities to deal with that fire. At the same time, the hospital was then trying to institute an evacuation for 42, 50 patients, something like that. And so they rely on us to provide that service, which we cannot, because all of our fire resources are fighting that fire to protect that structure. So when things like that happen and emergency services calls are coming out, you're right, we don't have a lot of structure fires. Tourists and new development in this community are adding to that service demand, which we're not necessarily able to fulfill because of the volume of calls we're receiving and a limited staffing and equipment that we currently have. Since I've been here in early 2020, the city's added a couple hundred units of development, residential units, but we've never increased the amount of staffing for police or fire, or added, another police station, substation, or fire station for using existing infrastructure, which was the genesis for this conversation to begin with. When I started looking at the resources that we have or don't have, and how we need to expand those, and then who's going to fund those added resources based on that call service demand. So understanding what other communities have done and having that background is how we were able to reach out and start a process to find a consultant that has experience in this field. And that's where we landed with Dr. Verdone and the BBC's consultant. So I hope you understand that's kind of where the context and how this all came to be tonight. With these added units and apartments and everything else that we're adding, we just don't have we cannot continue with the service demand that we currently have. We're going to have to start cutting back on a lot of the services that people in Glenwood have come to expect over the years, because we either don't have the staffing to provide that service, or they're just going to have to wait an extraordinarily long time in our response times.
So a follow-up question, thank you for that. Has the lodging tax typically been used? Does that go into the general fund? Hold on.
Yeah.
1 second. Does that lodging tax, I guess the concern I'm hearing from Commissioner Houghton is that tourists create such a burden for our community. And we have a lot of discussion in the community about how difficult it is to live here. And so now we're putting burden on developers who then pass it on through an increased cost in housing, right? While a huge burden are these tourists. So is there any way to burden the tourism aspect of our community versus the developers and the people that actually live here?
Do you want to run for council? No, I mean, because seriously, I mean, that is I think that's what you hear the council grappling with almost every day. And every meeting talking about balancing those two things. To your specific question about the lodging tax, obviously we have two parts to the lodging tax. One is fully dedicated to workforce housing that was recently passed on 2C. The original, while it has a variety of uses, those are all related to tourism promotion. I think that one of the open questions in my mind is really how tourism promotion has evolved over time and whether or not some of these types of things actually do go to promote tourism, right? You want to have your police be able to respond. You want to have fire be able to be there when you get dehydrated and have altitude sickness because it's your first time at this elevation. All of those things, in my mind, the council could find those are tourism promoted related and maybe tap into some of those funds, recognizing that that is not an infinite revenue stream and that it's supporting a lot of other things as well. But this is one of those things where, sales tax traditionally is one of those areas. While it's regressive in some ways, it does assist with, because everybody's paying it. If you're a restaurant, whether you're a tourist or a local, it's a little more across the board. This is just one of the tools we have. And unfortunately in Colorado, we're kind of limited on what those tools look like. So sometimes this is where we wind up. But like I said, to your point, it is a tough conversation all the time about how to balance those two things. Because obviously anytime we increase cost on housing, that's a struggle because we're trying to reduce housing costs. But at the same time, we're trying to provide those services. But yeah.
Commissioner Cowan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Make a motion?
Sorry.
Yep, we public
Well,
comment.
I think we do need to take public comment, and I did just want to run through the standards very quickly. That's okay.
Okay, is there anyone here for public comment on this issue? No one in person, anyone online? Okay, do you want to run through the standards?
I'll do this very quickly, but section 706040C3D3 outlines the criteria for approval for a code amendment. One being that a code amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other city policies. There are numerous portions of the 2023 comprehensive plan that address the need for improvements to public utilities and services. One is to make sure that we provide appropriate levels of service, especially in response to growth. Another would be that we actually update our development codes to address those needs, and one of those needs being specifically outlined in the comprehensive plan as a new fire substation. That's one that we talk about constantly in West Glenwood. Two, that it's not conflict with the municipal code. Again, impact fees are pretty common in the state of Colorado and in our community and in other communities that surround us for accommodating developmental impacts. Currently, the code does include numerous existing impacts, so adding an additional one's not in conflict with the existing ones that we currently apply. Three, demonstrate community need. I think we can all, agree that fire and police services are critical to promoting really what is the purpose of government, to promote the health, safety, and general welfare of citizens of the city of Glenwood Springs. And in our instance, as we went through with the fire fees and the lack of a police fee, there is a need to update what we're charging for new development in regards to the proportional impacts that the development imposes on these two departments. Four, responds to substantial changes in conditions in our policy. Again, we are seeing increases in population due to employment and development, and it is limiting over time the ability of those departments to maintain their service levels as they currently provide today. Also, you can imagine that with everything else, the cost of facilities continue to rise. So the cost to replace the existing services or the existing facilities to provide those services continue to go up. And five is consistent with the general purpose and intent of the code. Section 701030 outlines the purpose of our code, and that's to protect the public health, safety, and welfare, as well as to promote the strategies adopted by the Glenwood Springs Comprehensive Plan. One of the specifics intent outlined in that section is also that development shall be evaluated based upon the impact that it causes. That's kind of exactly the reason why we're here to discuss this today. And then the comprehensive plan policies that we previously discussed. Your options today are to recommend approval with conditions, or denial of the application to City Council. You can also continue this hearing and request for additional information related to the criteria approval outlined in the code. Staff does recommend that you provide a recommendation of approval to City Council. That's based on our evaluation of the application and determining and finding that it complies with Section 706040C3 D3. And we've provided a recommendation of approval, or a motion for approval here on the slide there. I know there was one in the staff report, and that one is outdated because it related to an anticipated file name that we were thinking of creating this. We created a code amendment project within our new permitting software. It never got to that point. But happy to answer any additional questions that you have.
Commissioner Cowan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Trent. I move to recommend approval of planning file 5025 to City Council, incorporating staff's findings because the application meets the approval criteria for a code amendment.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Connerton?
Yeah, I second that.
Call the vote, or any discussion? Figure out a way to tax the tourist. Figure it out, Carl.
This conversation and all of our taxing questions are always a very difficult balancing act.
For sure.
I think based on that study that we saw, we're really in trying to anticipate what those increases in the impacts will be based on our existing population. I think, John, I'm sorry, I called you Jay earlier. You brought up a very good point, but I think a lot of that development likely, if it's generating an increase in employment or an increase in population, I think that part of the proportionality is probably baked into the study, because this group does, these studies all across the state of Colorado. So our whole entire state's in a tourist economy. So it's tough. Never a fun conversation, but thank you guys. Now for the fun stuff.
The motion passes 6-1.
Okay. Do we have more? Yes, we do. We have Watkins doing a strategic housing plan update here.
Yes, ma'am. If you're ready for me. Should I hang out for a minute or get going?
Actually, I think I'm gonna call a bathroom break myself.
Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah,
you got up and everything.
Yeah. Well, past 7 o'clock, so Trent's not on. First really eight.
What's that? Oh, let's reconvene in 5 minutes. Okay.
All right, well, thank you guys for being here tonight. Good to see all of you. I'm going to do our yearly housing update. Becoming a tradition here. Became a tradition because when we adopted the strategic housing plan update 2 years ago, there was a request from someone on P&Z that we do this kind of update where we talk about how we're doing and meeting some of the goals and some of the lofty goals that were in that plan update. So that's what we're doing here today. Glenwood is in the media again this year, and not really in a good way. Here is a list. I apologize if it's hard to see. I can read it to you if you want. But here's a list from Forbes that ranks some of the places in the country with the highest increase in housing costs from 2024 to 2004. So we came in number 19 here. And the story actually gets a little bit worse when you look at who's on this list, because by some kind of quirks of how census data is collected, and of the kind of characteristics of some of these places on the list, they're not real places. Some of these are like, 300 person neighborhoods that are near affluent suburbs and that kind of thing. So when you take out some of these entries in here, we're really getting kind of close to number one in the nation for most expensive, or not most expensive, but where housing costs have increased the most over time. It's also interesting to see in here that our neighbors Rifle and Carbondale are in this list. Carbondale actually number one. So that goes to show that our city and our region have really seen tremendous increases in housing costs. And that's why we did this strategic housing plan update. So how much does it cost this year to live in Glenwood? We see the median sales price for a single family detached home. It's about 1.1 million. So we are past the 1 million mark. This is average. This is median costs for year to date through September. For condo, we're looking at about 498,000. So let's do an exercise here. If the median income for a family of two is $84,500, what is affordable to a household who makes that much money? And that's assuming that your housing costs don't exceed 30% of your income. And the other assumptions I made for this are that you have a down payment of $40,000, interest rate of 6 8%, 30-year term. That means that what's affordable to you is $295,000. So go here and here, and then one more time, 1.1 million.
Which is better,
295,000.
That's how I feel right now. I see this one more clearly.
Yeah. When you look at the condo side, let's do a different exercise here. If you remember from 2 slides ago, the median condo price was $498,000. So how much income do you need in a 2-income household to afford that? The answer is $150,000. What's that assumes still no monthly debt, $40,000 down payment, same interest rate, 30 years. And if you're curious what income you need to buy the median single family home, it's about $350,000. What about the rental side of things? It's a little bit harder to get kind of comprehensive data for this, but some publicly available stuff on websites. Six Canyon has 1 bedroom and 2 bedrooms, and these go from 127% AMI being area median income, to 148% AMI. 2 bedrooms from 127% to 158% AMI. That's $3,700 per month for 2 bedrooms. Greenleaf Lofts over in Glenwood Meadows, you see 105% AMI to 121% AMI for 1 bedrooms, 119% AMI for 2 bedrooms, 139% AMI for 3 bedrooms. So these are not brand new, but relatively new developments, apartment buildings, and none of this is below 100% AMI. What we're talking about when we talk about the difference between 1.1 million and 295,000 is an affordability gap. So that's the difference between what you can afford to purchase on average and what the median cost actually is. So our plan update that we did 2 years ago calculated that. 2 years ago, the gap was about $293,000 difference in between what's affordable on average and what things are actually going for. That's a many-fold increase from 2015, 7 years prior, when it was 49,000. So going back to our first slide, yes, housing prices have increased a lot. Why do we have affordability gaps for these kinds of things? The biggest reason is probably simply that there's just not enough homes for what we need. But there are some other macroeconomic factors at play here. This graphic is I took from a recent report from the State Demographer's Office. The blue line that's on top is growth in household income since the year 2000. And the gray line, the other line, is wait, nope, I got that wrong. Housing prices, the blue line that's on top, and then the other line that's lower than that is growth in personal income since the year 2000. So what we see is that historically home prices have increased faster than incomes have increased. And where we are right now is the biggest gap in between housing prices and personal income that we have. That's why it's expensive. So what do we need, according to our plan update, to rebalance our housing market and to make it more affordable for people? We need more homes. How many more homes? We need about 1,491 homes, about 1,500 homes was calculated for 2023. You project that out to the year 2043, and that becomes 1,858 homes. That sounds like a shocking number. I agree. This is one of the data points going along with the affordability gaps that we were talking about that explain why it's so expensive to live here. But what do we do about that? What are some strategies for improving affordability here? Our plan talks about that. We talk about using vacant city-owned land that has become more difficult with the passage of ballot measure A, but not impossible. And the city does own some big pieces of land, some of which would be appropriate for housing if we could convince all of our voters that it's a good plan and come up with that good plan. Also, we talk a lot in the plan about preserving housing that we have, and we have taken a bunch of actions to do that. There are different ways you can do that, such as community land trusts, preserving mobile home parks, which in the packet, we had a big success this year doing that. Rental assistance, which is something that we have started this year, a program for that. Rehabbing rental housing and home repair loans. Another strategy is density bonuses and zoning changes, something that we have tried to do here, but unfortunately we're not successful. Other recommendations from the plan are to position us to be ready for public-private partnerships, prioritize housing preservation, do code changes to adopt some of these recommendations, and to generally kind of take stock of our financial position and plan for the future. So I'm not going to go through all of these next couple of slides, but I did reproduce all of the recommendations that are in the plan. The first one, important one, is to create and preserve 93 units per year. That's annualizing the target for what we need to kind of catch up that really alarming big number that I mentioned before, how many more houses we need. We have done the annualized target this year. We've done about 148 units, so it's been a big year. And here are some more of our recommendations. Stop me if you'd like to dive into them. Now, why does it matter? Why does housing and housing affordability matter? This is the same slide that I had last year, and I have many of the same answers. Business staffing and growth relies on housing because homes are where jobs go to sleep. And employers and businesses need to be fully staffed to go full strength. And they need employees who can show up on time regularly, whether it's snowing, whether or not the South Canyon is closed because of an accident. It's much easier to be a reliable employee when you live near your job, when you live in Glenwood. Financial stability is also something that improves a lot when you have housing that's stable and affordable. When you have stable and affordable housing, you have much less need for public assistance of all kinds. Any kind of financial emergency that you might have is less severe when you have stable and affordable housing. And it also lets you stay in the same place for longer. So that means you have the chance to stay in the same job, maybe advance. You have that kind of stability in your life. When you live in town and don't have to travel far to get to your job, you are also producing fewer greenhouse gas emissions because you are likely driving less. There are also some health outcomes tied to affordable housing. You have more disposable income available to make good choices, like having more time to prepare healthy meals, have time to go to the gym and money to afford that, less stress. There's also interesting research about how it's better for kids. There are better educational outcomes are tied to stable, affordable housing, better attendance. They can stay in the same school and stay in the same peer group instead of having to change and move to new places. A little detail that I came across that I like to share is that when kids have a stable home, they can kind of create a consistent place for them to do their homework in all the time. So they kind of have their little nook in the house. And that's actually very good for kids because they have that kind of stability and ability to form habits. And a new one I added this year is community stability. If any of y'all have lost friends because they've had to move away to somewhere that was less expensive to live, you probably know what I mean. There's less people moving around, more connections, more opportunity to form deep relationships and volunteer in town. So there are a lot of reasons that housing affordability matters, and I hope you all agree with me. That's all I've got for you. What questions do you have for me?
Commissioner Houghton.
Hopefully this is an easier one. Where do we stand on our Prop 123 commitments? Are we keeping up? Are we meeting them? And do you anticipate that continuing next year?
We are on track. We think we're going to make it. It's a little bit of a floating target because of the nature of a couple of the projects that are going to count towards that. But the Benedict was one that provided a big percentage. The L3 building that's now called the Carter is going to provide some percentage of that. And then of course, Canyon Vista is going to be a big percentage too. So we anticipate that we're going to be able to do it.
And when is it banked, out of curiosity? When does that officially count towards our commitment?
Our deadline?
Like, if you issue a permit for affordable housing, you have to have a C of O for affordable housing before it counts?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I'd have to verify to be sure whether it's entitled or CO. It's one of the two though.
Okay, thank you.
One of the two.
Well, it's just interesting. We had that same question for a grant application today as to how many have been permitted in the year. So it'd be interesting to know, are they looking at permitted or CO'd?
Good question.
So I have a question. So we have all this development and I know we're still short, but all of these new units, minus any of the affordable housing units that are required, are still charging this astronomical pricing for rentals. Are we just banking on the fact that through the laws of supply and demand, as we have more rentals, the rates will go down, or are they just going to be the same unaffordable rates? And because of the desirability of our town, it still won't really truly affect the affordability of living here.
I think the supply and demand argument is important here. I think that having more supply just in general is going to help. It's going to help moderate big rent hikes that we saw, especially like 2021, 2022. So that's all going to help us, and that counts toward our annualized need that I was referring to there too.
Just seems like we're not seeing it at all, even from the real estate standpoint. It's like rental rates maybe are plateauing, but they're not going down. Anyway, just an observation. Commissioner Cowan.
Thank you. Thank you, Watkins. Appreciate it, man. And yeah, keep hanging tough with the density bonus and density conversation. I know we spent a couple of years here on the commission working through that, and I think pretty well. But we're not there yet, apparently. And with that, kind of contextualizing kind of adjacent unincorporated lands around, I guess let me back up a little bit. How is the current status dialogue with Garco on housing, not just the affordability side, but as far as development and opportunities maybe on that kind of that municipal county interface, that bleeder zone for some of these housing needs? Is there opportunity there for development to occur that would be maybe more responsive to what the immediate needs would be were without policy getting in the way?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I know enough about what's going on in Garfield County to truthfully answer your question. You know, on a personal level, we know the planners over there. We meet with them periodically, get along with them. I think the big thing though is that annexations, as you all know, are not likely to happen in Glenwood, unless, you know, it would take a special circumstance for an annexation to be successful and for a developer to want to do an annexation. So we're not going to see growth in Glenwood through annexations. I think you're asking about development that just happens in the county, though. You know,
Correct.
we are in our comprehensive plan. We have an urban growth area, and so when projects are proposed in that area, we will, you know, have a recommendation for whatever that's worth for the county commissioners to consider. But I think that's kind of all I can say about the likelihood of growth in the county. I don't know
And
if
they're
anyone
actually
else-
typically less restrictive than the city, correct? So county.
I'm not sure if I would say that or not.
That's the perception. That's the perception in the real estate world.
Maybe in terms of applicable regulations.
Yeah.
But I would say that they probably face the same pushback to development that we do.
Like it's got, yeah, thank you. And a little bit of kind of where I'm going is just, do we have an idea if we're taking a particular policy track here in our community about density and where we want it to be, and this perhaps precludes certain types of development that hits that mark. Do we know with respect to kind of adjacency to Glenwood itself, is that opportunity there as far as the, you know, unincorporated land use permissions that you know of? If you don't know, that's fine. But I'm just curious
Well,
if a developer could be like, well, fine, then I'm going to go to the south of the airport, you know, in this little spot. and-
Yeah, I think that the most likely places you would see development obviously are kind of in South Glenwood or up the 4 Mile corridor. The limiting factor on that, frankly, is access. And you know, we're trying to get that South Bridge built so that there's some at least emergency exit access and neighborhood access out there. I think if it doesn't go, it's very difficult for any of those, you know, at any level of density other than kind of typical, you know, large lot, large house subdivisions to see any of that kind of development in the county, more than likely. On the other side of the river, you run into kind of an availability of water and sewer treatment facilities. You kind of get into a little bit of a no man's land. So I think that's a limiting factor. And then of course, the Jackson property creates kind of a natural urban growth boundary, if you will, on the edge of the county with the city as you go south as well.
Okay.
and I can say also that when there is something adjacent and they would like water or sewer from us, we are pretty good at cooperating with them. We provide them can and will serve letters when possible, and we charge them. I believe now it's changed. We've charged them the same rates, monthly rates when they're in or out of the city.
Okay. Right. And remind me, does the county, are they contributing anything to South Canyon? The bridge?
So South
I'm sorry, not South Bridge.
Yeah, you know, there hasn't been a current commitment. I think at some point in the past, they were committed. I believe they passed a resolution of support around $3 million, but that has been a while ago. And I think something that we, you know, we have to be aware of as a county is in particularly difficult financial
Sure. Yeah.
condition in the moment. You know, severance taxes have dropped dramatically, those kinds of things. So I don't know if they will or to what extent they can.
Okay. And I just bring that up just because that might kind of color their sentiment of like where they would probably go with approving a project that has higher density. If they're
Yeah,
not really-
I think, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot at play with all of that.
Right.
I think certainly there are opportunities underneath the county land use resolution to do some more clustered development that would feel more, you know, a little bit higher intensity or higher density. I think that it's just kind of varied, you know, where the commissioners are at and where the constituents are at in those areas. I know that I think we're going to see another round out at the old Sanders Ranch. I don't know what the iteration is now, you know, on the way on the way to Carbondale.
Yeah.
But there again, that poses some of those urban development quandaries that we have regarding water and transportation and sewer treatment and all those kinds of things too.
Right.
So.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Commissioner Condon.
So thank you so much. Quick question. So the city land, I mean, I don't know, I'm just spitballing here because I know you guys are all gonna like curl your toes, but if you sold it, can you sell it to a developer who would agree to like develop affordable housing, like the Carter Project or, oh, I'll look at you. Or
Not without an election.
at all. So
No.
you can't sell it at all.
No.
What about, okay, so there's just one thing. Right.
Remember we voted on that?
I do
Do you
remember that.
Big vote that we had?
That
I
doesn't,
do remember that. And then obviously you guys are probably, look at like incentives for Glenwood Springs, people who want to develop something here because they own it. And I don't know, I'm just thinking about trying to be creative about how you could get land somewhere else somehow by trading something. I don't know. I know it's not the 1800s, but it's just a thought.
Commissioner Sipperly.
I heard you mention something about home repair loans, and I'm wondering where to find more information on that as partly as part of the Preservation Commission. Where is there a policy? Is there a loan program? Is this something in progress? How do I find out more?
there's not such a program right now. That was one of the recommendations that was nested within the topic of preservation in the plan.
Mhm.
So that is one way to preserve new housing. You make it easier to save homes that exist today so that they are not torn down and someone has to pay the cost of building new ones.
Yep. And that would include possibly converting a large house into a multifamily.
Potentially, depending
Yep.
how you design such a program.
Of course, that would incur new fees, but guess that's part of that conversation. I would be interested. Yeah, it would. I would definitely be excited to find ways to preserve existing housing stock and maybe convert it to multifamily for added density in places that are already served by city services.
I'm wondering, I know a module that exists in communities is these developers come in, they build these multifamily complexes and hold them for a certain period of time, get past the Colorado defects law, and kind of reduce their liability. And then they condominiumize the properties and sell units at times. Is there anything in the city building department, planning department that is kind of looking at that as a long range plan towards addressing just housing needs in our community and maybe looking at the code surrounding that and making it conducive to incentivizing that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to be corrected, but I don't see very many barriers to doing that. The
Is there not?
barriers,
Okay.
as far as the process goes, that would be an administrative subdivision.
Okay.
They would create a condominiumization plat and they would record it. There can be all kinds of challenges with the building itself. Obviously they'd need individual meters and all that, built to condo specs, according to the building code. So maybe as far as I can think, the challenges would be with the individual building itself.
Okay, so it would be more like bringing it up to code, installing meters, stuff like that, but there's not actually like a real barrier to the process.
I don't think so.
No.
Because
And
impact fees have already been paid. Okay,
we're actually encouraging developers to do that even on our for rent properties up front, because,
Oh, good.
likely into the future, subdivision or condominiumization regulations are not likely to get easier.
right,
So we encourage them to do that at the onset.
okay. Perfect. Any other questions, comments? And this is just an update, so we're not voting on anything.
That's right.
Commissioner Guyman has her bag packed. I'm teasing. Okay, do we ask for comments from the public? No, okay, thank you.
We lost them all.
Okay, and staff report or staffing updates? Oh, do we have something else? Oh, our joint council meeting.
Oh, sorry. I thought you had commissioner comments if you wanted any before, but I can jump right into
Oh,
director.
Any commissioner comments? We're commented out.
Yeah, just a couple updates from me. Again, happy to be with you all again. Our city council joint work session is scheduled for next Thursday. That will be anytime between 3 and 5 p.m., depending on how the agenda gets set. But we wanted to bring that to your attention so that you could offer up any topics that you wanted to have with them. I don't know, kind of asking you on the spot here tonight, but if you collectively can come up with some, we do think it's wise to kind of set a couple of topics so that the conversation doesn't, go all over the place, and we can make sure that we can have maybe a few minutes dedicated to each one.
Will you be sending us like an invite or time?
Yeah, as soon as the agenda comes out, I'll make sure to let you know the time, but it will be between 3 and 5
How do we nominate topics to get on the agenda?
right now. Discuss them as a group, maybe send up. Yeah, I don't think you all need to agree. I think if you want to all send me your comments individually, and then I can see where there's a common theme, and we can do that.
Observing?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you just want to send those to me here in the next couple of days, I'll put it together. I won't actually put those topics on the agenda, but I can, have a list and hand it out to city council and have it available for you, and you'll be there. And then just staffing update, just wanted to let folks know that Joel Asplund is our new building permit technician. He's doing a great job. I think he's been with us now for about 3 weeks, and he's picking up on our permitting software very well, being very responsive to customers, and we're really grateful for him to jump right in there. We lost Haley, who was really great with the public and great with the programs. So we unfortunately did lose Kevin Reyes, our housing development manager. So that job is currently being posted. Thanks to Watkins for kind of really stepping in, and he, he's got a strong knowledge base in housing, and whether he wants to or not has kind of been assigned to help out and to make sure that those programs are getting the attention that they need while we're filling that position. But he has a lot of other great qualities and things that he applies. So I can, it's not just housing, but I had the same conversation with him. But that's about it from us. Couple of topics coming forward next month. You'll likely have a variance application. We'll likely have potentially some additional code amendments associated with fast tracking of permits and requirements of Proposition 123. And I think there was one other one. Can't remember what it was. Oh, well, we'll see. Maybe an appeal or two.
We get meeting notes next month.
Oh, yeah. There were no minutes attached to this agenda because we realized when we were getting it out that no one had written those. Well, from August. Right.
Trent, you need to be doing this the entire meeting like Hannah. She was. That's a chat GPT function.
I'm gonna talk to council and see if maybe we can think.
Yeah,
about
get AI to write them.
action minutes. I mean, since these meetings are recorded and posted online. But
Yeah.
Mostly,
That's what we do.
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's not already there.
We'll keep that policy moving forward then.
Okay. This meeting's adjourned.
But
Oh.
sorry, I think
Nope, too late.
Sorry. I think I did mention it. I would encourage you all, we are kind of just going through some of our general policies and customer service offerings and trying to think about maybe ways that we can be a little bit more efficient, more responsive. So I do encourage you, if you have any experiences out there or any questions or concerns, please reach out and call me. I would love to have a conversation with you, but, just that might be part of our conversation moving forward with council too. So thank you.
Meeting is adjourned.
Again.
Again.